She rode to the wrong ranch. The cowboy smiled. Right mistake, right time. The sun was beginning to set over the rolling hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah tightened her grip on the reins of her horse, Daisy, as they trotted along the dusty path. It had been a long day of traveling, and the rough terrain had taken more out of her than she expected. She wiped a streak of sweat from her forehead and glanced at the map she had carefully folded earlier. Her destination was a small ranch, one she had been told offered work for travelers willing to lend a hand. The thought of starting fresh had kept her going through the weeks of challenges she had faced, and now, finally, she felt she was close. She had left the small town she grew up in with nothing but a backpack, a few essentials, and the hope of finding a place where she could belong. The past months had been difficult, jobs that never lasted, apartments that felt cold and lonely, and the constant feeling that she was drifting without a clear purpose. This ranch, she hoped, would be different. The idea of living among open fields, working with animals and breathing fresh air had seemed like a dream, almost too good to be true. But now, as the shadows grew longer, Sarah realized that the road ahead seemed different from what she had imagined. The map she held in her hands was old, the paper edges frayed, and the ink slightly faded. She had been following a series of signs along the way, but the last one had seemed unclear, and she hadn't noticed a fork in the path. Daisy's hooves clopped softly on the dry earth, the only sound accompanying the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. Sarah paused for a moment, listening, but no other travelers were in sight. A nervous feeling began to grow inside her. "Maybe I took a wrong turn," she murmured aloud, her voice breaking the quiet of the evening. She studied the map again, squinting at the tiny symbols and lines that marked roads and ranches. According to her calculations, she should have reached the ranch by now, but instead, the path seemed to stretch endlessly, winding through hills that were becoming more rugged with every turn. She tried to calm herself, telling herself that she had traveled long enough to trust her instincts. The problem was, the sun was dropping fast, and the sky was turning darker with every passing minute. She realized that by the time she figured out where she was, it would likely be dark, and being alone in the wilderness at night was not an idea that filled her with confidence. She pulled Daisy to a stop and let out a deep sigh. Her throat was dry, and she regretted not drinking more water earlier. She reached into her backpack, retrieved a small bottle and took a careful sip, hoping to clear her mind and think clearly. The next part of the road seemed even narrower, flanked on both sides by thick brush that scratched against Daisy's legs as they passed. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. She had been told that the region was safe, but stories of wild animals and lost travelers had always found their way into her thoughts. For a moment, she considered turning back, retracing her steps to the last place she recognized. But she was low on energy, and the idea of going backward after a long day was not appealing. "Just a little further," she whispered to herself, trying to summon courage she didn't feel. As the path curved around a hill, Sarah spotted a small wooden fence in the distance. Beyond it, she could see a building that looked like a farmhouse or ranch house, the windows reflecting the fading light. Relief washed over her. Finally, someone must live here, she thought. She urged Daisy forward, hoping that she could ask for directions and get back on track. Her heart raced with a mix of exhaustion and anticipation, imagining a warm room, food, and a safe place to rest for the night. When she approached the gate, she saw that the ranch was quiet, almost too quiet. There were no signs of activity, no sound of animals in the distance, only the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Sarah's confidence wavered, but the thought of stopping in the open evening was even worse. She opened the gate slowly, careful not to startle Daisy or make any noise that might alarm the people inside. The wooden boards creaked under her hands, echoing slightly in the stillness. She guided Daisy up to the porch of the main house and dismounted, her legs trembling from the long ride. She could see the front door, solid and made of dark wood, and she took a deep breath before knocking. Her heart thumped loudly, each beat making her feel more exposed and vulnerable than she had in months. The knock sounded too loud in the quiet of the approaching night. For a few seconds, there was no response. Sarah's anxiety grew, and she wondered if she had made a mistake coming here. Then the door opened slowly. A man appeared, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn hat that shaded his eyes. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, but there was a faint smile on his lips. He looked at her carefully as if assessing her, but not in a way that felt threatening. "Evening," he said in a low, steady voice. "Can I help you?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, trying to explain herself clearly. "Hi, I'm sorry," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I was trying to find a ranch where I can work for a while. I think I may have taken a wrong turn. My map isn't very clear and I got a bit lost." She glanced down at Daisy, who was standing patiently nearby. "I'm not sure if I'm at the right place, but I didn't know where else to go." The man's smile widened just a little. "You might be in the wrong place," he said, his tone friendly and calm, "but that's not always a bad thing." He stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. "Why don't you rest for a moment? You look like you could use it." Sarah blinked, surprised by his hospitality. She had expected annoyance, maybe even a refusal, but instead he offered kindness, and it felt like a small miracle after the uncertainty of the day. As she led Daisy into the yard, the man introduced himself as James. He explained that he ran the ranch mostly on his own, after choosing a quieter life following personal losses. His calm demeanor and simple way of speaking made her feel more at ease. Sarah could feel the tension in her shoulders begin to melt slightly as she accepted his invitation to sit on the porch with a glass of water he handed her. The warmth of the wooden porch under her hands, the soft hum of crickets in the distance, and the faint smell of fresh hay and earth made her feel like she had stumbled into a place that was unexpectedly comforting. They talked quietly as the sky turned darker. James asked her a few questions about her travels and listened attentively to her story without interrupting or judging. Sarah found herself sharing more than she had intended, about the struggles she had faced in the past months, her hopes for the future, and the exhaustion of constantly trying to find her place in the world. He nodded, occasionally offering small words of encouragement, and she felt a sense of relief in being understood, even by someone she had just met. As the last rays of sunlight faded behind the hills, Sarah realized how tired she was. The thought of sleeping outdoors, even for a night, was no longer appealing. She accepted James, offered to let her stay in one of the guest rooms above the barn. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, warm, and safe. She fed Daisy, brushed the horse down, and then settled into a small bed, her mind still buzzing with the events of the evening. She reflected on how a simple wrong turn had led her here, to a place she hadn't planned to visit, but where she already felt a small sense of belonging. The night was quiet, broken only by the occasional sound of an animal in the distance or the wind moving through the trees. Sarah lay awake for a while, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. She realized that sometimes mistakes were not the end of the road, but a detour leading to something unexpected and valuable. The ranch, the stranger who had welcomed her, and the open fields all seemed like a small miracle after the uncertainty and struggle of her recent life. Eventually, she drifted into a deep sleep, the kind that only comes after exhaustion, relief, and a sense of safety. Tomorrow would bring a new day, new challenges, and perhaps a new path. But for now, she let herself rest, grateful for the unexpected kindness that had met her at the end of a long, uncertain journey. By the time the first light of dawn crept over the hills, Sarah was already awake, feeling a little stronger, a little braver, and a little more certain that even wrong turns could lead to the right places. The morning sun spilled gently over the hills, painting the fields in a soft golden glow. Sarah woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of calm. The previous night's worries, the wrong turn, the uncertainty, the exhaustion, felt smaller somehow, as if the ranch itself had a quiet, reassuring presence that made everything seem a little safer. She stretched and glanced around the small guest room above the barn. The room was simple, with a wooden bed, a small dresser, and a window that opened to a view of the sprawling fields. It smelled faintly of hay and morning air, earthy and comforting. She quietly descended the stairs and stepped outside. The ranch was alive in a gentle, welcoming way. Chickens clucked as they wandered across the yard. A few cows grazed lazily in the distance, and the soft sound of a distant stream added a melodic touch to the morning. Daisy, her horse, had already been fed and was quietly nibbling on some hay in the barn. Sarah walked over to the porch, where James was leaning against the railing, drinking a cup of coffee. He looked at her with a calm, friendly expression and nodded in greeting. "Good morning," he said simply. "Sleep well?" Sarah nodded, smiling despite the lingering nervousness she felt. "Yes, thank you. It's very peaceful here." She hesitated, unsure of what to say next, but James's easy silence encouraged her to continue. "I never expected to end up here. I thought I was lost, but I'm glad I found this place instead." James smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to hold more than his words could say. "Sometimes the wrong path leads to the right place," he said. "You never know what you might find when things don't go exactly as planned." Sarah nodded, feeling a warmth in his words. They reminded her that life didn't always follow the straight, predictable routes she tried to plan for herself. The morning passed quietly. James showed her around the ranch, explaining the basics of the chores and the responsibilities he carried alone. There were fences to check, animals to feed, and equipment to maintain. He explained each task patiently, showing her not just how to do them, but also why they mattered. Sarah listened carefully, eager to prove that she could be helpful. She realized that even the small tasks had a rhythm and a purpose that felt satisfying in a way she hadn't experienced in months. Feeding the chickens, checking the water troughs, and brushing Daisy became grounding, almost meditative activities. As she worked, James observed from a distance, offering guidance when needed but never hovering or criticizing. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. In the past, she had often encountered people who judged her mistakes harshly, but here, even her missteps were treated as learning opportunities rather than failures. By mid-morning, the sun was higher, and the ranch seemed to hum with quiet activity. Sarah noticed small details she hadn't seen the night before, the way the wind bent the tall grass, the soft cooing of pigeons, and the smell of fresh earth mixed with hay. It all felt alive and real, grounding her in a way that city life never had. After a while, James suggested they take a short break. They sat on the porch, sipping cold water and watching the horizon. Sarah found herself opening up more than she expected. She spoke about the difficulties she had faced over the past few months, the loneliness, the uncertainty of constantly moving, and the fear of never finding a place where she belonged. James listened without judgment, nodding occasionally, offering small comments that encouraged her to continue. "You've been through a lot," he said finally, "but it seems to me that you're stronger than you realize. The fact that you made it here alone says a lot about you." Sarah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She had spent so much time doubting herself that hearing someone acknowledge her strength, even in small ways, felt surprisingly powerful. The conversation turned to lighter topics. James told stories about life on the ranch, the animals he cared for, and the small joys he found in everyday routines. Sarah laughed at his anecdotes, realizing that despite the solitude, his life was rich in ways she hadn't imagined. She shared some stories of her own, the small adventures and mistakes that had shaped her journey. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen, not for her failures, but for her efforts and her determination. By midday, Sarah was ready to help with more substantial chores. James had asked her to assist with repairing a fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. At first, she was nervous. She had never done this kind of work before, but he guided her patiently, showing her how to handle the tools safely. The work was physically demanding, but she felt a deep satisfaction in seeing progress with her own hands. Each nail hammered, each board secured, felt like a small victory, and James's calm approval made her efforts feel recognized. As they worked side by side, the conversation flowed easily. Sarah noticed the subtle ways James moved, the care he took with the animals, and the quiet confidence that came from years of experience. There was no rush, no pretense, just steady work and mutual respect. She realized that this slow, deliberate pace of life was something she had been missing. The constant hustle of her past life had left her anxious and exhausted, but here, even a simple task felt meaningful. Lunch was simple but satisfying: bread, cheese, and fresh fruit, shared on the porch while Daisy rested nearby. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the warmth of the sun and the soft sounds of the ranch. Sarah felt her shoulders relax, the tension from the previous night melting away. She realized that mistakes, like taking the wrong road, could sometimes lead to unexpected blessings. This ranch, James, and the quiet life here were exactly what she needed, even if it wasn't what she had planned. After lunch, James suggested they check on the animals in the back pasture. As they walked together, Sarah felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in a long time. The cows, horses, and other animals seemed to respond to her presence, calm and curious. James showed her how to feed and care for them properly, and she found herself absorbing every detail. It was hard work but rewarding, and she felt proud of her ability to contribute. Throughout the afternoon, they continued with various tasks: mending fences, moving supplies, and tending to the animals. Each chore brought a new lesson, a new chance to prove to herself that she could handle challenges she had once thought impossible. James's presence was steady and reassuring, but he never took over, allowing her to learn at her own pace. Sarah began to notice small changes in herself. Her confidence grew, and she started to see her mistakes as opportunities rather than failures. By late afternoon, the sun began its slow descent again, casting long shadows across the fields. Sarah sat for a moment on the porch, watching the sky change colors, feeling a deep sense of peace. She realized that her wrong turn yesterday had been a turning point, not a setback. The kindness of a stranger, the rhythm of ranch life, and the quiet beauty of the land had given her more than she could have imagined. It wasn't just a place to rest. It was a place to heal, grow, and rediscover herself. James joined her again, carrying a bucket of water for Daisy. He looked out at the fields with a thoughtful expression before glancing at her. "You've got a good heart," he said quietly, "and it's not just about doing the work, it's about caring. You've got that in spades." Sarah felt her chest warm at his words. It was rare that someone recognized the effort behind her actions, and hearing it aloud made her feel valued in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. As evening approached, Sarah helped feed the animals one last time and made sure everything was secure for the night. James suggested they sit by the fire pit outside the house, a simple arrangement with logs around a small fire. They shared stories as the stars began to appear, talking about life, choices, and the unexpected turns that often led to the most meaningful moments. Sarah realized that this connection, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences, was something she had been longing for. By the time the fire had burned low, she felt a sense of belonging and gratitude she hadn't felt in months. The wrong path had led her here, and for the first time, she felt that maybe mistakes weren't always something to fear. Sometimes they were opportunities in disguise, guiding her towards something she didn't even know she needed. As she finally headed to bed that night, Sarah reflected on the day. The ranch, the work, and James's calm guidance had given her a new perspective. Life was unpredictable, and sometimes the plans she made wouldn't work out, but the detours could lead to unexpected joy, growth, and connection. She fell asleep to the soft sounds of the ranch at night, Daisy resting nearby, feeling a little more confident, a little more hopeful, and a little more certain that she had found a place where she could belong. The next morning, Sarah woke to the soft light of dawn spilling over the hills. The sound of birds and the gentle movement of leaves made the world feel peaceful and alive. She stretched and took a deep breath, feeling the crisp morning air fill her lungs. After 2 days of unexpected experiences at the ranch, she realized she was slowly finding a rhythm in this new life, a rhythm she hadn't known existed in months of uncertainty and travel. James was already outside when she stepped onto the porch. He smiled at her, holding a bucket of water for Daisy. "Morning," he said simply. "Ready for another day?" Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Even though the tasks on the ranch were hard, they felt meaningful. Each small accomplishment gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. She walked to Daisy and began brushing her, enjoying the soft warmth of the horse beneath her hands. The simple act of caring for an animal was grounding, a reminder that small, consistent efforts could have a big impact. After feeding Daisy and the other animals, James suggested they tackle a project he had been putting off for weeks. A section of fencing in the far pasture had been damaged during a storm, and it needed repairing before the cows wandered too far. Sarah felt a thrill of nervous anticipation. She had helped with fences before, but this one was much larger, and the responsibility felt heavier. James reassured her with a calm smile. "We'll do it together. I'll show you the ropes and you just follow along." They walked to the damaged fence, carrying tools and supplies. The work was challenging, requiring lifting, hammering, and careful attention to detail. Sarah struggled at first, fumbling with nails and wood, but James guided her patiently. "Take your time," he said. "It's not a race. The important thing is to do it right." She felt a sense of relief and gratitude at his approach. There was no pressure, no judgment, only guidance and encouragement. Each step she took to secure the boards felt like a small victory, and she began to feel a sense of pride she hadn't experienced in months. As the morning passed, their conversation flowed naturally. Sarah shared stories from her past, her mistakes, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke about the loneliness she had felt while traveling, the uncertainty of moving from place to place, and the constant fear that she would never find somewhere she truly belonged. James listened carefully, nodding occasionally, but he never interrupted or judged. His calm presence made it easier for her to open up, and she realized how refreshing it was to be heard without being criticized. "You've faced a lot on your own," James said finally, "but it's clear you've learned a lot too. That's important. Sometimes we grow the most when we think we're struggling." Sarah smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. She had spent so much time focusing on what she lacked that she often forgot to acknowledge what she had gained through experience: resilience, adaptability, and patience. His words reminded her that her struggles weren't failures. They were lessons shaping her into a stronger person. By midday, the fence was taking shape. Sarah's confidence grew with each board secured, each nail hammered. James occasionally stepped back to observe, offering guidance but allowing her to take the lead. She began to notice how much she enjoyed the physical effort, the problem-solving, and the feeling of accomplishment at the end of a task. Unlike her previous jobs in the city, where work often felt repetitive and meaningless, this ranch work had a tangible, visible impact. During a short break, they sat under a tree, drinking water and enjoying the soft breeze. Sarah looked around at the open fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the mountains in the distance. It was a stark contrast to the crowded streets and noisy apartments she had left behind. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "I never imagined I'd feel so at peace somewhere I didn't even plan to come to." James nodded. "Sometimes life has a way of surprising us. You think you know where you're going, but the detours can turn out to be exactly what you needed." Sarah pondered his words, realizing that her journey had been full of unexpected turns, but each had led her closer to a place where she felt she could grow, belong, and even be happy. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, they finished the fence. Sarah stepped back to admire their work, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The cows now had a secure pasture and the animals were safe. James clapped her on the shoulder. "You did well," he said. "I couldn't have done it without your help." Sarah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Praise had always felt foreign to her, but in this setting it was genuine and motivating. She realized that being useful, making a difference, and being appreciated were feelings she had been missing for far too long. After finishing the work, James suggested they check on the orchard. Rows of apple trees stood in neat lines, their branches heavy with fruit. He explained how to care for the trees, prune branches, and collect ripe apples. Sarah found herself absorbed in the tasks, marveling at the balance of effort and reward. She could see the results of her labor almost immediately, which brought a satisfying sense of accomplishment. As they worked side by side, the bond between them grew naturally, built on shared effort, trust, and mutual respect. Later, while taking a break under the shade of an apple tree, Sarah found herself reflecting on the past. She had traveled for weeks, uncertain and anxious, believing that her future depended on reaching a specific place or achieving certain goals. Yet here she was, in a place she hadn't planned to be, feeling more alive, more confident, and more connected than she had in a long time. She realized that her mistakes, taking the wrong road, getting lost, had led her to a place where she could truly grow. James noticed her thoughtful expression and asked, "What's on your mind?" Sarah hesitated, but then shared her realization. "I always thought I needed to follow a plan to get what I want, but maybe life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the wrong path brings you exactly where you need to be." James smiled, nodding. "Exactly. Life has a way of teaching lessons through unexpected experiences. You just have to be willing to learn from them." As the afternoon turned to evening, Sarah helped James bring in the animals and secure the barn. The work was tiring, but it left her feeling accomplished and grounded. Each task she completed made her more confident in her abilities, more certain that she could face challenges she hadn't thought possible. She also noticed subtle changes in herself. She was more patient, more focused, and more aware of the small details that made life at the ranch both demanding and rewarding. Once the chores were complete, they sat on the porch again, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Sarah felt a sense of gratitude she hadn't felt in months. The wrong turn she had taken, the unexpected arrival at James's ranch, and the work she had done that day all seemed to fit together perfectly. She realized that even though she hadn't planned this path, it was leading her toward growth, understanding, and a kind of happiness she hadn't expected. James turned to her with a calm, gentle expression. "You've handled today well," he said. "It's not easy to learn so much in a short time, but you did, and you didn't give up even when things were hard. That matters more than you think." Sarah felt a surge of pride. His words weren't just praise. They were recognition of her resilience, her determination, and her willingness to embrace challenges. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. As darkness fell over the ranch, they lit a small fire outside. The stars began to appear, sparkling in the vast night sky. The cool night air mixed with the warm glow of the fire created a peaceful atmosphere. Sarah found herself opening up even more, sharing her dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. James listened carefully, occasionally sharing stories of his own life, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. The conversation flowed naturally, comfortable and meaningful, building a quiet but strong connection between them. By the time the fire had burned low, Sarah felt a deep sense of belonging. The work, the shared experiences, and the calm presence of James had given her more than she could have imagined in such a short time. She realized that sometimes life's detours weren't setbacks at all. They were opportunities to grow, connect, and discover parts of herself she hadn't known existed. Finally, she headed to bed, exhausted but content. The barn was quiet, Daisy rested nearby, and the world outside seemed at peace. Sarah reflected on the day, recognizing that the right lessons often came from unexpected experiences. She had learned about patience, resilience, and the value of hard work. More importantly, she had learned that even mistakes, like taking the wrong path, could lead to exactly the right place. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. The wrong turn, the challenges, and the lessons of the day had all brought her closer to understanding herself and the life she wanted to live. Tomorrow would bring new tasks, new experiences, and perhaps new revelations, but for now, she felt at peace. She knew that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, and that realization filled her heart with quiet joy and confidence. The morning sun broke over the hills once more, casting a warm glow across the ranch. Sarah woke feeling a quiet sense of anticipation. Unlike previous mornings, there was no nervousness in her chest, only a calm confidence she hadn't known she possessed before arriving here. She stretched and glanced out the window, watching Daisy grazing in the field and the other animals moving peacefully. It was hard to believe that just a few days ago she had been lost, tired, and unsure of where she belonged. Now, the ranch felt like home in a way she had never imagined. James was already outside, tending to the chickens. When he noticed Sarah coming down the stairs, he smiled and waved. "Morning," he said. "Ready to get started?" Sarah nodded eagerly, feeling a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in a long time. The rhythm of the ranch, the steady work, and the quiet connection with the animals had given her something she didn't even realize she was missing: stability, satisfaction, and a feeling of belonging. After feeding Daisy and completing the early morning chores, James suggested they tackle a project he had been thinking about for weeks. There was a small section of the barn that needed repairs, and he thought it would be good for Sarah to take the lead this time. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was capable of handling it on her own, but James's calm encouragement reassured her. "I trust you," he said simply. "Just take your time and do your best." Sarah felt a rush of determination. She gathered the tools, examined the damaged boards, and began working methodically. Each nail she hammered and each plank she secured filled her with a sense of accomplishment. She realized how much she had grown in just a few days. Her confidence was increasing, her patience was stronger, and her belief in herself had deepened. James watched from a distance, stepping in only when guidance was necessary, allowing her to take ownership of the work. As the morning wore on, Sarah noticed the small details that made life at the ranch so fulfilling. The way the sunlight hit the hay, the gentle sway of the trees, the quiet hum of animals moving around, everything felt alive and interconnected. She began to see that life didn't have to be rushed or complicated to be meaningful. Each action, no matter how small, mattered, and her contribution to the ranch created a tangible difference. During a short break, Sarah and James sat under a tree, drinking water and watching the fields. She spoke about the lessons she had learned over the past few days, the value of patience, hard work, and trust. She reflected on the way a wrong turn had led her here, and how that unexpected detour had brought her exactly where she needed to be. "I never thought getting lost could feel so right," she said softly, smiling. James chuckled, a warm, knowing sound. "That's life sometimes," he said. It doesn't follow a straight path. The detours often teach us more than the path we plan for ourselves, and sometimes they bring us exactly where we're meant to be. Sarah felt a quiet joy at his words. For so long, she had been focused on following a specific plan, believing that her mistakes would only hold her back. Now, she saw that life had a way of guiding her, even through errors, toward growth and understanding. After the break, they continued working together. James asked Sarah to help check on the animals in the back pasture and feed them. As she walked among the cows and horses, she felt a connection to the land and the creatures she cared for. Each task reminded her of her own growth. She had arrived uncertain and hesitant, but now she moved with purpose and confidence. James occasionally offered advice, but he let her lead, showing his trust in her abilities. By midday, they took another short break. Sarah and James shared a simple lunch on the porch, enjoying bread, cheese, and fresh fruit while the sun shone warmly over the fields. Conversation flowed easily, filled with stories, laughter, and reflections on life. Sarah noticed how natural it felt to share her thoughts, fears, and dreams with James. She had met him only a few days ago, yet she felt a bond of trust and mutual respect that often took years to develop. After lunch, they began preparing for the evening chores. James showed Sarah how to ensure the animals had enough water for the night and how to secure the barn and gates. She followed his instructions carefully, thinking about how much she had learned in such a short time. The confidence that had been missing from her life was now growing steadily, reinforced by the tangible results of her hard work. As the afternoon passed, Sarah noticed the subtle rhythms of the ranch. The changing sunlight, the movement of the animals, and the quiet, methodical way James approached each task all contributed to a sense of order and calm. She realized that the ranch wasn't just a place, it was a way of living, a practice that required patience, attentiveness, and care. She felt herself becoming part of that rhythm, no longer a visitor or outsider, but a participant in the life of the ranch. As evening approached, Sarah and James finished the last of the chores. They brought the animals into the barn, checked that the fences were secure, and tidied the tools. The day had been long and physically demanding, yet deeply satisfying. Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment that she hadn't known for months. The hard work, the connection with the animals, and the partnership with James had given her a feeling of purpose that went beyond any previous job or experience. Once the chores were complete, they lit a small fire outside. The stars began to appear in the vast night sky, and the air was cool and refreshing. Sitting by the fire, Sarah reflected on her journey, the wrong turn that had brought her here, the kindness of a stranger, and the growth she had experienced over the past few days. Life had taken her on an unexpected path, but it had led her to a place of belonging, understanding, and hope. James noticed her thoughtful expression. "You've changed since the first day," he said. "You seem more certain, more confident." Sarah smiled, feeling the truth in his words. "I think I've realized that mistakes aren't always bad," she said. "Sometimes they guide you toward what you really need, even if you don't see it at first." James nodded, his calm smile reassuring and warm. "Exactly. Life teaches us in mysterious ways, and often the lessons we least expect are the most valuable." They continued to talk quietly, sharing their thoughts and experiences under the starlit sky. Sarah felt a deep sense of connection, not just to James, but to the land, the animals, and the life she had discovered here. The wrong turn she had taken seemed less like a mistake and more like a guiding step toward something greater. She realized that the journey wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about growth, understanding, and the experiences along the way. Eventually, the fire burned low and they stood to go inside. Sarah helped tidy the porch and make sure everything was in order for the night. She then returned to her small guest room, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. The world outside the ranch seemed distant and unimportant. Here, she had found safety, purpose, and a renewed sense of hope. As she lay in bed, Sarah thought about the past days, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, the small victories, and the unexpected lessons. She realized that life was unpredictable, and plans didn't always unfold as expected. Yet, even in mistakes and detours, there was value, growth, and sometimes joy. The ranch had given her more than she could have imagined: trust, confidence, and a place where she could truly belong. Sleep came easily that night, deeper and more restorative than she had experienced in months. She felt a quiet happiness, knowing that she had found something meaningful in an unexpected place. The journey that had begun with confusion and uncertainty had led her to clarity, connection, and purpose. The wrong turn, the unexpected ranch, and the guidance of James had changed the course of her life in ways she could not have anticipated. When she woke the next morning, Sarah felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The ranch, the work, and the connection with James had shown her that life's mistakes were not failures, they were opportunities. She smiled at Daisy as she approached, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought her here. Every task, every conversation, and every moment of patience and effort had built a foundation for a new beginning. By the time she finished the morning chores, Sarah realized that she no longer felt the need to rush, worry, or question her place in the world. She had found a home, even if it wasn't where she had planned to be. The cowboy's smile from the first night echoed in her mind. Right mistake, right time. She finally understood what he meant. Life's unexpected turns had a way of leading her to exactly where she needed to be, and the wrong path had become the right one. As she looked out over the fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the hills stretching into the horizon, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been difficult, full of mistakes, uncertainty, and fear, but it had also been beautiful, full of learning, growth, and unexpected joy. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them with courage, patience, and confidence. The ranch had become more than a place to rest. It had become a place to grow, to heal, and to discover the strength and resilience she had carried within her all along. And for Sarah, that realization was more valuable than any plan, any goal, or any expectation she had ever held. The wrong turn had truly been the right one, at the right time, and her life had been forever changed for the better.